Welcome back, everyone. This is Dark Souls 2, and this is Daz. Today we're going to be exploring more of the Lost Bastille. Before we do, however, we've got quite a nest egg of souls, so we're going to go back to Majula and see what we can do with them. The first order of business is to visit Lenegrast. We're going to buy up his supply of Titanite shards, as well as his repair powder, because you can never have too much repair powder. I considered getting a new weapon, but I figured that we probably had enough. So instead, let's reinforce some stuff. The spear and the fire longsword have been very good to us indeed, so let's continue to show them some love. We've been using a decent number of spells and miracles, so I'm going to go ahead and upgrade one of our cleric sacred chimes. Not by a lot, but just keep it relevant. That should do it for now.
If you make it back.
Let's level up a little bit.
Bearer, see, lest.
So, as we level up, I want to keep things fairly balanced, but I also want a lot of adaptability for high agility. Agility influences the invincibility frames you have while you roll, so having high agility is mandatory if rolling is a big part of your strategy, which it probably will be by the time the game is over. And, you know, it's just, you can never have too much vigor, endurance, or vitality. Those are all just good things to have. Alright, that about does it for this trip to Majula. So let's head back to where we need to go. Alright, we're going to start from the prison complex this time, and we're going to try out a new weapon, the Greatsword. This enormous slab of metal is only recently actually wieldable by us and only in 2 hands. It's so heavy that even with nothing else equipped in our hand slots, we're still over encumbered. So, fat rolling ahead. I see you hiding down there. There's another Haid Knight hiding out here. And against my better judgment, we're going to take him on while wielding this enormous thing. But first, let us show him the respect due of a proper warrior. So, the Greatsword. The Greatsword is slow, but very powerful. Or at least it would be if we had it upgraded at all. Right now it's not doing too much better than our spear. Of course the Greatsword has weaknesses. Each swing takes a lot of stamina, and the overhead chop that we're doing is not especially accurate. The tracking is kind of... ugh. If we were to one-hand it, we could do a sweeping motion, but we cannot do that. This Haid Knight with the spear is much more fearsome than the one with the sword. As you can see, we just got our butts kicked. When taking on a particularly tough enemy, you should probably use a weapon you're familiar with. So let's say goodbye to the Great Sword for now and switch back to something more tried and true. The spear and shield is rarely a bad option. It gives you plenty of versatility and defensive options. Now, fortunately, the Haid Knight is not far from the bonfire, so we can just sort of pick up where we left off. Now, because we have upgraded the spear, and we're a bit more spec for it with higher dexterity, we're doing much better in this fight, though he still puts up a pretty good struggle. I come very close to dying here again, and that's sort of embarrassing. However, their wild swings make Haid Knights kind of vulnerable to backstabs. Now, the Haid Spear sounds like it's right up our alley, but it requires a whopping 25 dexterity, so we cannot use that yet, or probably not for a while. If we can, though, it's a powerful spear that also does lightning damage. Down here in this semi-hidden area, we find a couple goodies. It's easy to miss because it doesn't necessarily look like you can actually survive this drop. Now, I'm going to say right now, I missed an important item in this area that I get the next time I'm recording first thing, so don't worry about it. Worry about me and my forgetfulness, but don't worry about that. At this point, the undead wardens are nothing new, though they do drop twilight herbs, which restore quite a few spell casts on use, so if you are a caster, it might be worth it to stick around and kill a couple of these guys for a while until you've got a healthy supply. Using that switch opens the gate for a shortcut to the blacksmith workshop, as well as dogs. Dogs are actually a little bit difficult with the spear. They tend to move somewhat erratically. Since we lit the torch, or at least I think so, the blacksmith has moved off his former seat and opened up access to that chest with some twinkling titanite and the craftsman's hammer. We have just enough strength to wield it in two hands. It doesn't look particularly impressive, but it's a fairly powerful weapon in its own right. However, the fact that it was sort of packaged in with the Twinkling Titanite is instructive, because you can only upgrade it with Twinkling Titanite. That makes weapons like these powerful, but expensive and somewhat exclusive options, because Twinkling Titanite is very rare. Fortunately, even unupgraded, this craftsman's hammer is very powerful. It has the same attack pattern as a normal mace for the most part. It's otherwise not particularly remarkable, but it looks kind of cool. Dogs in general are kind of a crapshoot when you fight them. Because of their erratic movement and their very quick attacks, you're likely to take some damage unless you are fighting them from a long distance. This area holds a bit of an interesting secret. Like the well in Majula, there's a mechanism in this one. If you knock down the rock, these guys show up. I would have preferred Nessus Flash Shard, to be honest. Our reward for taking them out is the Wanderer's set, some fairly powerful light armor. The Swordsman class starts with it. It's worth noting that if for some reason you die to those 3 undead citizens, then you'll actually lose access to the Wanderer's armor because they do not respawn. So if you're really hell-bent on getting it, make sure you don't die. Now, there is a secret here, and I'm a little concerned that I won't be able to get it because the swordsman broke the explosive barrels. However, with a little help from the fire longsword, I think we'll be able to make it. It doesn't really look like that explosion reached, but when free stuff is on the line, I'm not going to complain. Our reward is the Archdrake robes. These are a bit lighter than the Elite Knight set for slightly less protection, but it's a nice change of pace, and they look very cozy. The Archdrake shield is also a fairly uniform upgrade to our Silver Kite shield, so let's go ahead and equip that. Looking good! I bet the Bastille gets kind of chilly at night. This is a little unfortunate. Sometimes enemies can just sort of body block you in a corner. It's one of the downsides to using a shield. If attacks don't necessarily bounce off your shield, enemies can just sort of keep swinging at you until you're either in a corner and can't get away, or you simply run out of stamina. Now, there's some very unique weapons in these chests. The Twin Blade and the Parrying Dagger. The Parrying Dagger is interesting because you wield it in the offhand, and instead of attacking with it, you parry with it, hence the name. It has very high parry priority, and if you're going to use parrying as part of your main fighting style, then it's probably worth it to pick one up. The Twin Blade is just a high dex weapon that I won't be able to show off for a while, but it's pretty cool. Behind the Lockstone contraption is a soul vessel, like the one we picked up. Back in the manor in Majula. And behind the other door is a wilted dusk herb, which is an even more powerful version of the normal dusk herb. This incredibly safe and not sketchy looking elevator will take us up to this room. And pick up some skeptic spice. Spices are unique items that will have a use that will only become apparent later, so I'll cover it then. They're very useful though, so be sure to pick them up if you know where they are. Alright, this jump can be a little tricky, so I'm going to equip my Silver Cat Ring and my Ring of Life Protection. And I'm going to just sort of steel myself for the drop. Our reward is a bonfire aesthetic. Bonfire aesthetics are very unique items that have a very unique purpose. If you use one at a bonfire and you burn it, then the area around which you have burned the aesthetic will essentially go up an intensity level like you are on New Game Plus. That means everything gets much tougher, everything hits harder. It's not an ember for the faint of heart. However, it also respawns all enemies, even ones that don't normally respawn. So, if you have farming in mind, then a bonfire aesthetic might be your only option. Because for some reason, there are a number of items in this game that are rare drops off of enemies that only spawn once. I can't say I'm particularly fond of that mechanic, but it is what it is, and bonfires aesthetics exist for mostly that reason. Now, there was a door in the area that we took up the elevator to. However, I'm not going to take it just yet because it leads to an area we haven't explored yet. And I'd like to show off the normal way to get there first. The Lost Bastille is chock-filled with illusionary walls, so even if you're fairly sure you know what you're doing, it's worth it to go ahead and just be thorough and check walls that look suspicious. I contemplate going down there for a bit. And I finally decide to do it. It's sort of a useless shortcut that isn't really a shortcut. It just puts us back near the blacksmith's workshop. However, we needed to go back there more or less anyway, because we want to eventually get back to the servants' quarters to actually continue on our quest. Now, the little basement down here is special. It leads to an optional area that we will explore next time. There's also a dog, a large club, and a chest I completely ignore because it blends in so well with all of the boxes. I'm really good at this game. That too will be picked up next time. Gonna go ahead and switch out our rings again. The Ring of Giants will increase our poise by quite a bit, which means that we won't be staggered as easily by enemy attacks. Given all the dogs around here, that might be pretty useful. After we politely close that door, we have access to that soul of a nameless soldier. Not fair, I wasn't ready. Now, a quick aside about magic weapon and pine resin. The flame longsword cannot normally be enhanced. You can't usually put resin on it. However, you can put enchantments on it via a catalyst. This is essentially a way to incentivize magic users using weapons and non-magic users investing a little bit in magic so that they can further make their weapons more powerful. Right. This area overlooks where we just were, and I got very lucky there because the jump didn't go off, but I landed on a beam and just sort of walked across anyway. Sometimes Hal leads a charmed life. This ladder simply leads up to where the fork in the road and the tower would have led us anyway. Poor soul. There are a lot of weird twisting and turning side paths in Lost Bastille, which I appreciate because there aren't that many of them in this game. Usually paths are fairly linear. This looks like trouble. However, we can thin the numbers a little bit by poking our spear through the bars. That will work with any weapon with sufficient reach, I think. There's some undead citizens hiding inside these little... I don't even know what these are. Kilns? No, they look like they have prison bars on them. And that one looks huge. Whatever they are, I don't like them. There's a secret passage back here leading to some treasure. Initially, it just looks like a pointless dead end, but layers within layers, there's another secret door. For taking this detour, we get a bracing knuckle ring. This ring will reduce the rate at which our equipment degrades. It's useful when using certain weapons, but for the most part, the fairly mundane armaments we're using stay in good shape for a while, so don't really feel like I need to equip it. Some more lighting options over here, as well as another fairly well-hidden secret. It's also kind of a pain in the butt because it's a one-way path. The safest way to traverse paths like this is to just sort of hug the solid wall. As you can see, I'm sort of angled in such a way that I'm advancing slightly towards the solid wall. That way I sort of sidle along without any real danger of falling. At the end of the path is a soul of a brave warrior for a nice little soul infusion, as well as a special shield. The Golden Wing Shield has the curious property of being able to deflect spells by parrying. It's a somewhat niche benefit, but it's good to have nonetheless. There are a couple of shields in the game that have that ability, so if you miss this one, don't feel like you necessarily need to go back for it. feeling very uncharitable towards dogs right now. Fortunately, they do end up dropping useful items sometimes. If you're lucky, you might even get a human effigy. Back once again to where we're supposed to go. As you can see, the Golden Wing Shield doesn't actually have very good protection against physical attacks, but it does have very high reduction against magic, so its purpose is fairly clear. You don't necessarily want to take this shield into a sword fight, but if you expect spells to get slung against you, then by all means, bring it along. You always want to be proactive in taking out the undead citizens, or mummies, or whatever you want to call them. Because if they explode on you, the results are basically never good. Fortunately, the spear is a good, quick weapon. It's very effective for taking these guys out. So they shouldn't pose much of a problem. There are a ton of these guys in this area, which leads me to believe that these are the primary source of prisoners this place got. Through this door is the elevator room, which is also the way you can entirely skip the Ruined Sentinels fight. If you simply bring a lockstone and come from the prison area, you can use the lockstone device, take the elevator up, and completely skip the Sentinels. It's a pretty useful trick if you have trouble with that boss. These fellas can petrify you with their explosions, but it's actually not a very big deal. That might be an even weirder statue than the one over by Majula. Locked. I'll have to come back. Anyway, the petrifying mummies aren't really a big deal because their explosions do less damage. And the way the explosions work is, it's honestly really unlikely that you'll get hit by enough of them to get petrified without either dying or just killing them all. Those two royal crossbowmen are really evil, and I hate them. The approach is easy enough, and once complete, we enter Sinner's Rise. Seems like a good enough... What the hell? Okay. I don't like that. Maybe we should go and explore the Bastille a little bit more to figure out what exactly that is. At any rate, we're going to have to look into that next time. For now, I think we should be satisfied with our progress. We're getting very close to finding a great soul. Until then, see you later.